Very good morning to you. It's Jim from Maverickstar Observatory. Just want to talk to you about a few things of reality, and just put things in perspective of what we actually are facing. So before we do that, let's just thank those few people, as it is always the case, that, chip in a few bucks for the observatory. What we do mainly here is monitor the magnetic poles on our planet. We look at the changes to our climate and try and make future predictions so that people can avoid some of the troubles. But that's all well and good unless people are actually not just listening but actually participating in protecting themselves and their loved ones. And it's very difficult to get through to people these days because they simply don't have the afforded time to actually take a look at some of their vulnerabilities and assess the situation. And that is why in 6 to 8 months, there are people possibly even listening to this video right now that won't be there, that won't be alive in that short space of time, and for a multitude of reasons. And largely it's for reasons that they didn't help themselves at all. They pacified the information and just put it down as an ordinary guy on YouTube just rattling on about things. And that's not the case, because I guarantee you now there are tens of thousands of people that will not be with us in 6 to 8 months time because they will have passed away. Could be avoided. Most people that won't be alive could have avoided death simply by taking a good look around themselves and assessing their vulnerabilities. Ask some simple questions like, do I live on land which is or has a potential to flood? Floods have displaced in the last 12 months hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, and been responsible for tens of thousands of people's lives lost just for floods. You should be asking questions like, where can I get food from if there's nothing to buy in the shops? How am I going to feed my loved ones? Where can I get clean drinking water from? Or how can I purify that drinking water so it doesn't make me ill, if I need to drink it? How can I keep warm if there's no gas and electric? How am I going to keep my family warm? Can I make or get a shelter if I lose my home? For whatever disaster, we've seen it, haven't we, in the last 12 months? Tornadoes rip across, small towns, destroying everything in its path. Floods that have washed out people's houses, floods that have washed, thousands of hectares in countries like Afghanistan. What about if you're caught up in an earthquake like what happened in Turkey, in the recent weeks? That sort of thing is what people should be thinking about. It's that sort of mentality of assessing the vulnerabilities is what keeps you alive in this day and age. A lot of these things are on the increase, and people needlessly have died in these events if they had some form of planning and preparation in place. You have to realise that the dangers are increasing and that the chances are becoming more of a possibility that you will be caught up in some form of event in the near future. And still to this day people listen to what I've got to say and do nothing, act on nothing. And as they do that, they plunge their families and loved ones into perilous times in the future, because they believe that they can quickly avoid an event. And that's exactly the same mentality that people had in Europe over the last year, that was woke up to the sound of their houses being washed away in torrent floods. And of course I've heard it too many times now, when interviewed, when the houses have washed away, when the houses have been torn apart by a tornado, when floodplains have ripped across, hundreds of thousands of hectares of land, taking everything with it, crops, life belongings, family members. They all say the same thing. We never suspected or even thought that this would happen or could likely happen. This is the common attitude of people. What I'm trying to say here is, do a little bit of work now. Just think about your vulnerabilities, assess some of these situations around you. You could save yourself a lot of heartache in the future just by paying attention to what I've got to say. Take a look around you, analyse the risks that you could possibly face and deal with them. Put some plans in place. What you're going to do if you fall ill and there's no doctors to turn to. How are you going to make yourself better? Things like that. If the police aren't there to protect you, how are you going to protect yourself and your loved ones? Have you got a plan? Have you got, a security tool of some sorts that you can use if you need to protect yourselves? And then there is, of course, at the heart of everything, for most people that watch this video, how are you going to protect any life earnings or investments? Because we're looking at a photo here of New York. Most people live in these buildings, these high-rise buildings, and they're not sustainable. Everyone that lives in these buildings have to rely on imported foods, energy, you name it, into that city in order for it to sustain life as it does. Now I want you to think about next time you're in the shop and you see, aisles of empty shelves and no food on them, and then you hear about packaging companies burning down, and you hear about, the New World Order's desirable plans to make sure that you have nothing at all. No investment, no home, no car, just the clothes on your back if you're lucky, and they believe that you will still be happy. I want you to think about what these people are talking about, because behind closed doors right now, as we are all here listening to this, they're strategically putting plans in place to make this a reality. And no one's sticking together at this point in time. And you know that as well as I do. And therefore, for most of us, we're going to have to be on our own and look after ourselves. Because there are very few two like-minded communities out there. When you compare the numbers of human beings in this world, and then look at how many of these communities are, there are just a couple of handfuls here and there of people with like-minded views. And that's the reality of the next 6 to 8 months. It needn't be the case, but it is. And people feel powerless to do anything about it, but they have all the power they could possibly want. They just don't utilise it. And that's why things, sadly, and I think you'll agree with me, are not going to improve. We're going to go through this to the very end. And we're not just talking about climatic events, tornadoes, earthquakes, increases in atmospheric cosmic rays, radiation. We're talking about wars and looming Third World War, which has probably, according to a lot of people, already got underway, just hasn't been officially announced. The economies are collapsing, the American dollar is losing traction. Nobody has paid any attention to the fact that we've increased our technology, and as we've done that, we've reduced the demand for the workforce, so people can't obtain money to participate in this monetary system. A lot of these people that are now forced by no choice but to take a low-paid job just to pay the bills. That there is, unfortunately, a point in time which will come and they won't be able to, and at that point they'll wish they never invested $200,000-300,000 or pounds into a house. They'll wish they'd have spent that money on a bit of land, so that they could probably take care of themselves better than what any local government could ever do so. And this is just a repeat of history, honestly. If you look at what destroyed the great empires of the past, you'll find it was the very same things as what we face today. We just choose not to accept it, and we don't learn from history. But it's all there in black and white, plain for us all to see. The Mayans had to abandon their cities because a lack of water. They went to, incredible measures to try and capture the water in cisterns under the ground, and failed. And it was like, all of a sudden one day it was decided that the entire city would leave, and left pots, pans, someone was going to return in the next hour, but didn't ever again return. They just abandoned it, turned their backs on it. That's going to be really hard for people to do in this time, because to turn away from something that you've worked most of your life to obtain is very difficult, and it's for that reason that it's probably going to take you down with it. You've got to be prepared to walk away when you need to, and have no regrets. A lot of people don't value life or personal life, but that's the choice which you'll be made to think about and ponder about at that split second. You need to think about it. It would have been better for you to think long and hard now, make some plans and preparations for such events that could possibly turn up in your life, and you'd be a lot better off right now than tens of thousands of people. What we're trying to do is help people, but in order to help them, they have to be prepared to help themselves. Because the realities are, what we're all facing is not like we've been accustomed to experiencing, the good times. Now we've got to start paying the price, and it's just a matter of time before, we're going to face ourselves desperate times. It's like I say, not just down to the climatic events and natural occurrences and anomalies that are taking place, which are in their own right very dangerous. If you're caught up in one of these events, your life is at risk. But it's also the things that human beings have caused themselves. We've allowed for decades, guys, this, we've allowed for corruption, and we've accepted corruption as part of our ruling governments. But the point is now is the corruption has got to a point where it's ridiculously out of control, and that life no longer has a value to these people that choose to sacrifice other people's lives in order to make money and wax themselves rich. You know who I'm talking about, and they've got blood all over their hands and face. But we won't work together. You hear people say we're going to do something about it, but they never do. Because they have all the power, and they have stripped all the power away from you guys. I know you don't like to hear it. You'd rather me be optimistic and tell you that you can change things, but you know the reality is that half of people listening right now wouldn't even help their neighbour in trouble. And that's how far we've come. And that's why I'm certain that, you know, in 6 to 8 months, even some of the people that have listened right now have had their fate sealed through pacification of their own minds. If we really worked together, there wouldn't be just a handful of people that chipped in a few bucks for such a good cause like what we've run here, you know, the observatory. To date, we've provided an archive of data that we've collected ourselves. You know, we haven't had to rely on any organisation for that data. We collected it ourselves. We purchased the equipment and we built the equipment we couldn't afford to purchase. That's why we can predict accurately where the next position of the magnetic North Pole is going to be, because we monitor that every 3 seconds, and we've got equipment in other countries around this world. And to a lot of people that watch these videos, you know, they're not interested in supporting stuff like this. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think that they can even support themselves or their loved ones, because they think it's never going to happen to them. Just like we see after, you know, a natural catastrophe takes place, you know, when these people are interviewed that have lost everything, they say that same thing. We never thought it would ever happen. We never thought we would be experiencing the losses that we've lost. So, you know, the video today is all about you guys assessing your vulnerabilities, taking a good look around you and trying to answer some of them questions, like where you're going to get clean drinking water from, where you're going to get food from, how you're going to put a shelter over you and your loved ones, how you're going to keep warm, how you're going to look after yourself, you know, if there is no police for you to turn to. Just ask yourself those questions and others. Do I live on a floodplain? Is it likely to flood again? What are my dangers of my local surroundings? And what can I do to possibly avoid some of these situations? If you can answer them questions, you know what, you've already put yourself in a lot better position to avoid some of them catastrophes which might take place, you know, at a later date. Guys, there's a link down there if you want to help support what we do here at the observatory. And again, it's not mandatory, but you know, if we have thousands of people just came, took a look, listened and went, we wouldn't have the equipment and we would have very little to talk about. So without support, you know, there's not very many miles in the tank, let's say that. You know, we do depend on some form of support, and we hope that, you know, we give people an opportunity to avoid some, you know, real catastrophic events in the near future, even if it's just by, you know, getting you to change your mindset on certain subjects. You know, maybe we can help you and your loved ones, and that's what we're here to do. So if you want to help support us, there's a link down there in the description. And the only other thing to say is, you know, give it some thought. As always, bye for now.